Doctor finds beggar child sleeping at hospital door, and the reason. Dr. Robert Mitchell let out a deep sigh as he walked through the quiet halls of Mercy General Hospital after another grueling 36-hour shift. Exhausted, and his mind still filled with the complications of his last surgical procedure, he could hardly wait to get back to his empty apartment. That's when his eyes caught sight of a small, huddled shape near the service entrance. Under the pouring rain that battered Chicago on that winter night, an Asian child slept drenched and shivering. Her delicate features and the fragility of her sleep, even in those inhumane conditions, made the doctor's heart ache. Robert quickly approached, momentarily forgetting his fatigue. "Hey, little one, wake up. You can't stay here," he said, gently touching the girl's shoulder. The child, who couldn't have been more than 5 years old, half opened her eyes, revealing a frightened and confused gaze. She tried to mumble a few unintelligible words before closing her eyes again, clearly exhausted. Robert looked around, searching for any adult responsible for her, but the parking lot was deserted at that late hour. The heavy rain continued to fall, and the temperature kept dropping. "I can't leave her here," he murmured to himself as he lifted the soaked little girl into his arms. She was surprisingly light. Her thin arms and pale face suggested possible malnutrition. Her simple wet clothes clung to her fragile body, and Robert felt an unexpected wave of protectiveness wash over him. When he re-entered the hospital carrying the child, he was immediately approached by Nancy, the head nurse on the night shift, known for her strict adherence to hospital rules. "Dr. Mitchell, what do you think you're doing?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the wet child in his arms. "I found this girl sleeping by the service entrance, alone in this storm. I couldn't leave her there," he replied, already heading toward an exam room. Nancy hurried to keep up, her expression clearly concerned. "You know very well we have specific protocols for these cases. We need to call Child Protective Services immediately. We can't just pick up children from the street and bring them into the hospital without documentation or a guardian," she warned. Robert knew Nancy was right. As head of the pediatric cardiac surgery team, he was well aware of the protocols. But something about this child kept him from simply following the rules. "I'll examine her first, Nancy. She's freezing and possibly dehydrated. Then we'll handle the paperwork," he said curtly as he laid the girl on the exam table. Carefully, Robert began removing the child's wet clothes to examine her properly. That's when he noticed something that made his heart race: a fresh surgical scar running along part of the girl's chest. A scar he would recognize anywhere. "Impossible," he murmured, lightly tracing the mark with his fingers. "Nancy, bring me the pediatric cardiac surgery records from the last 6 months. Quickly, please." As the nurse reluctantly left to fulfill his request, Robert continued his examination. The child had mild hypothermia and signs of exhaustion, but her heartbeat, though weak, seemed steady. He started an IV with glucose and covered her with thermal blankets, unable to take his eyes off that scar. Nancy returned a few minutes later with a digital file. "Here are the records, doctor. But I insist we need to notify the authorities. This isn't a standard situation, and you know it." Robert ignored her comment and began flipping through the recent surgery files. After a few minutes, his eyes widened as he found what he was looking for. "It's her, Nancy. Patient Emily Kim, 5 years old, surgery to correct a ventricular septal defect performed 4 months ago. The family never returned for post-operative follow-ups. They simply disappeared after being discharged." Nancy stepped closer, now more interested than disapproving. How did she end up here alone? And why would a family abandon treatment for such a serious heart condition? Robert shook his head as he continued reading the chart. Immigrant family. Parents work in garment factories in Chinatown, according to the social report. Poor housing, insufficient income. He paused, feeling a lump in his throat. The hospital covered the surgery costs through the assistance program, but they would have had to pay for medications and follow-up visits. At that moment, little. Emily stirred slightly under the blankets, still unconscious. Robert was overcome by a guilt he didn't fully understand. How many other children like her had passed through his hands without him truly grasping the realities they faced outside, the controlled environment of the operating room? "I'll stay with her tonight," he decided, adjusting the IV drip. "If she doesn't improve by tomorrow, or if we can't reach the family, We'll contact Child Protective Services. Doctor, that's completely irregular, Nancy protested. Your shift is already over and... Then log overtime for me, Yinchi. Cut in. I won't leave her alone, Nancy, not tonight. The nurse sighed, recognizing that determined expression Dr. Robert wore when he made an irrevocable decision. Fine, I'll prepare the temporary paperwork, but first thing tomorrow we need to sort this out. After Nancy left, Robert pulled a chair close to the gurney and sat beside his small patient. As he watched the girl's peaceful face, he couldn't help thinking of his own daughter Emma, whom he hadn't seen in over 3 months since the bitter end of his divorce from Jennifer. The divorce had been devastating. After 18 years of marriage, he and Jennifer could no longer make it work. The long hours at the hospital, weekend emergencies, last-minute shifts, it had all slowly eroded their relationship. And Robert knew most of the blame was his. He had repeatedly chosen the hospital over his family, believing he was doing the right thing, saving lives. Now, at 46, he was a lonely man, living in a sterile apartment near the hospital, while his ex-wife and daughter had moved to Milwaukee. Emma, now 16, barely answered his calls. His thoughts were interrupted when he noticed a slight movement. Emily was slowly opening her eyes. "Hello, little one. You're safe now," he said softly in English, hoping the girl would understand. To his surprise, Emily stared at him with an expression of relief and recognition. "Heart doctor," she murmured in simple English before closing her eyes again. Those 2 simple words struck Robert like lightning. She recognized him. Somehow, this child had found her way back to the doctor who had saved her life months ago. Morning came, and with it the first timid rays of sunlight peeked through the exam room window. Robert had dozed in the uncomfortable chair, keeping one hand on Emily's pulse all night. When he awoke, he found 2 big dark eyes watching him intently. "Good morning," he said with a smile. "How do you feel?" The girl didn't answer, but slowly reached a tiny hand out from under the blankets and gripped Robert's finger with surprising strength. "Grandma sick," she finally said in broken English. "Grandma very sick." Robert sat up straighter, trying to understand. "Your grandmother is sick? Is that why you came here?" Emily nodded, her eyes suddenly filling with tears. "Grandma heart like Emily, grandma medicine gone, daddy worked too much, mummy worked too much, nobody take grandma hospital." Robert's heart clenched as he realized what had happened. This 5-year-old child had gone out alone, likely crossing a large part of the city in the middle of a storm to seek help for her sick grandmother. "Do you know where you live, Emily? Can you tell me where your home is?" The girl shook her head no, but then began frantically rummaging through the sleeves of her hospital gown, as if searching for something. Frustrated when she didn't find what she wanted, she looked at her wet clothes folded on a nearby chair. Paper. Emily has paper. Robert reached for the clothes and checked the pockets of the small dress. In one pocket, he found a soaked piece of paper, but it was still possible to make out a handwritten address, partially smudged by the rain. "Argyle Street," he read, recognizing an area of Chinatown known for its concentration of garment factories and tenements where many immigrants lived in poor conditions. Just then the door opened, and Nancy walked in, accompanied by a middle-aged woman dressed formally. "Good morning, Dr. Mitchell. This is Patricia, the hospital's social worker. I'm here so we can sort out the child situation," Nancy announced, giving the doctor a meaningful look. Patricia stepped forward with a professional smile. "Good morning, doctor. I understand your concern for helping the girl, but we must follow standard procedures. I'll contact Child Protective Services and begin the process of locating her family. If we don't find any guardians, she'll need to be placed in temporary foster care." Robert felt Emily squeeze his hand tighter, as if afraid of being taken from him. "We have the family's address," he said, showing the damp paper. "The girl came here seeking help for her grandmother, who apparently also has heart problems." "Even so, we must follow protocol," Patricia insisted. "A child can't just wander the city alone, no matter the reason. There are questions of abandonment and neglect to investigate." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. Robert felt growing frustration. He knew the protocols well and understood that once Child Protective Services got involved, Emily could spend weeks in foster care while bureaucracy moved at its sluggish pace. Meanwhile, her sick grandmother would remain without care. "Patricia, I completely understand your position, but we're dealing with an exceptional situation. This girl is my patient. I performed heart surgery on her just a few months ago, and now she's come back seeking help for her grandmother, who appears to have a similar condition. With all due respect, doctor, that doesn't change legal procedures," the social worker replied, already typing notes into her tablet. Robert took a deep breath, trying to contain his irritation. "I'm only asking for a few hours. My shift restarts at 2 this afternoon. Until then, I plan to personally go to this address and assess the family's situation. If we find real signs of neglect or abandonment, I'll contact the authorities myself." Patricia and Nancy exchanged doubtful glances. "This is highly irregular," Patricia began. "I take full responsibility," Robert interrupted. "I'll sign any necessary documents, but we can't simply ignore that there may be an elderly woman at risk, in need of medical care." After a long discussion, Robert finally secured a 6-hour window, contingent upon signing a liability waiver. Despite disagreeing, Patricia had to yield to the doctor's hierarchical position at the hospital and his willingness to legally assume responsibility for the situation. Once they were alone again, Robert turned to Emily, who had been watching everything with wide, frightened eyes. "We'll find your grandmother and help her, little one, I promise." The girl's face lit up with a timid smile, the first since she'd been found in the rain. After arranging dry clothes for Emily and making sure she'd eaten properly, Robert took his car and, defying all hospital rules and possibly a few laws, placed the girl in the back seat. "We'll find your home, Emily," he said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. As he drove through Chicago's busy streets toward Chinatown, Robert couldn't help but think how surreal the situation was. Less than 24 hours ago, he'd been finishing another exhausting shift, thinking only of going home to sleep. Now, he was practically kidnapping an underage patient to search for a sick grandmother in some rundown tenement in the city. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Jennifer flashed on the car's dashboard screen. Robert hesitated but answered on speaker. "Hello?" "Robert, we need to talk about Emma's child support." His ex-wife's voice was cold and direct, as it had been since the divorce. "The amount you deposited this month is less than we agreed." Robert took a deep breath. He'd completely forgotten about it. "Jennifer, I'm in the middle of a complicated situation right now. Can we talk about this later?" "Always the same. Excuse, isn't it?" Her voice was heavy with resentment. "Always something more important than your family. Nothing's changed." "That's not fair," he protested, aware that Emily was listening from the back seat. "I'm literally trying to save lives here." "And what about your daughter's life?" Jennifer shot back. "Emma has a ballet recital this weekend. Do you know how many performances you've missed over the years?" Robert felt the familiar lump in his throat that always appeared when his distant relationship with his daughter came up. I didn't know about the recital." "Of course you didn't. You never do, Robert." There was a heavy silence before Jennifer continued, her voice slightly softer. "Look, I don't want to fight. I just need you to fix the payment, and it would be good if you showed up to the recital. Emma would never admit it, but I know she looks for you in the audience." Robert felt his eyes burn. "I'll be there, I promise, and I'll fix the payment today." After hanging up, he noticed Emily watching him intently in the rearview mirror. "Your daughter?" the girl asked curiously. "Yes," he replied, surprised by the child's perceptiveness. "My daughter, Emma. You her doctor too?" The innocent question hit Robert like a punch. No, he had never truly been his own daughter's doctor, in the sense of genuinely caring for her well-being. He was always too busy looking after other people's children. "No, little one, I'm just her dad, or trying to be," he answered, with a sad smile. When they finally reached Argyle Street, Robert was confronted with the harsh reality of the rundown housing that sheltered much of Chicago's immigrant community. Old, crumbling buildings pressed against each other, many clearly subdivided into tiny rooms that housed entire families. The address on paper led them to an old three-story building, its peeling facade and broken windows betraying years of neglect. Several clotheslines stretched across the front of the building, forming a colorful contrast against the faded grey walls. "Is this it?" asked Robert, and Emily nodded vigorously, already trying to unbuckle her seatbelt. As they entered the building, they were met with a musty smell mixed with food being prepared in various makeshift kitchens. The narrow hallway was poorly lit, with multiple doors opening into small rooms where entire families lived in spaces barely big enough for one person comfortably. Emily held Robert's hand and pulled him determinedly to the end of the hall, climbing an unstable staircase to the second floor. There she stopped in front of a door with the number 17 painted by hand. "Grandma here," she said, knocking on the door with her small hands. There was no answer. Emily looked at Robert with growing concern and knocked again, harder this time. Finally, a weak voice came from the other side. "Who is it?" Emily quickly replied in her native language, and soon the door slowly opened, revealing a woman around 70 years old, visibly frail. Her face showed immense relief at seeing her granddaughter, followed by confusion when she noticed Robert. "Emily! Thank God!" the elderly woman exclaimed in heavily accented English, hugging the girl tightly. Then she looked at Robert suspiciously. "Who are you?" "I'm Dr. Robert Mitchell, a cardiac surgeon at Mercy General Hospital. I operated on Emily a few months ago," he explained, immediately noticing the woman's labored breathing and the slight bluish tint to her lips. Recognition lit up the elderly woman's eyes. "Heart doctor," she said, using the same phrase Emily had used. "Please come in." The inside of the small apartment was clean and tidy, despite the obvious poverty. A single room served as a bedroom, living room and kitchen, with a tiny bathroom separated by a curtain. 3 mattresses were neatly stacked in one corner, clearly serving as beds for the whole family at night. The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Chang, sat down with difficulty on one of the apartment's only 2 chairs, still holding Emily close. "Where are Emily's parents?" Robert asked, concerned by the absence of adults. "Work," Mrs. Chang replied, pointing to a clock on the wall. "Leave 5 morning, come back 9 night, every day." "And you're alone with Emily?" he asked, already visually assessing the elderly woman's health. Mrs. Chang nodded. "I take care of her. But yesterday—" She paused, searching for the words in English. "Yesterday I very sick. Medicine ran out 1 week ago, fainted. When I woke up, Emily not here." "Do you have heart problems?" Robert asked, moving closer to examine her. "Same as Emily. Family problem. In my country I doctor." "Cardiologist," she revealed with quiet pride in her voice. "No heart, not good. No medicine, no checkup, too expensive in America." Robert felt a wave of respect and sadness. Here was a fellow medical professional reduced to living in precarious conditions, without access to the care she had once provided to others. "May I examine you?" he asked, taking the stethoscope he always carried from his bag. Mrs. Chang agreed, and the brief exam confirmed Robert's suspicions. She showed clear signs of heart failure, likely worsened by the lack of medication. "You need to be hospitalized immediately," he declared after finishing the exam. Mrs. Chang's face closed into an expression of refusal. "Cannot. No proper papers. Hospital asks for too many documents, too much money. And who takes care of—" "Emily? I'll take responsibility," Robert stated firmly. "What about Emily? She can stay at the hospital too while we contact her parents." The elderly woman hesitated, looking at her granddaughter with concern. "My daughter's husband, he doesn't like hospitals. He's afraid of problems with documents, with the government." Robert was beginning to understand the complexity of the situation. The family was likely undocumented, fearing deportation if they came to the authorities' attention. "I understand your concern, but this is a matter of life or death, Mrs. Chang. You need urgent treatment and Emily can't be left alone." At that moment, little Emily, who had been attentively watching the entire conversation, tugged at Robert's lab coat sleeve. "Dr. Hart help Grandma like helped Emily?" The hopeful look in the child's eyes shattered the last remnants of professional detachment Robert had maintained. This had become personal. Yes, Emily. I'll help your grandmother, just like I helped you. After convincing Mrs. Chang to go with them, Robert helped her gather her documents and medications, while Emily packed some clothes into a small, colorful backpack. Before leaving, Mrs. Chang insisted on leaving a note for Emily's parents explaining the situation. On the way to the hospital, Robert noticed in the rearview mirror that the elderly woman was clutching a worn folder tightly to her chest. Sensing his questioning look, she explained, "My medical records, heart studies I did in my country, very important to me." Robert nodded, respecting the connection she maintained with her former professional identity, even in their current circumstances. When they arrived at the hospital, Robert was immediately approached by Nancy, whose expression wavered between relief and disapproval. "Dr. Mitchell, we were about to call the police. You can't just take an underage patient without authorization." "The situation is more complicated than we thought, Nancy," he replied, helping Mrs. Chang out of the car. "This is Emily's grandmother, and she needs immediate hospitalization. She's showing signs of decompensated heart failure." The head nurse's eyes widened at the elderly woman's condition. "I understand, but still, we'll handle the paperwork later, Nancy. Right now, I need you to prepare a gurney and call Dr. William from cardiology. I'm taking personal charge of this case." The next few hours were frantic. Mrs. Chang was admitted to cardiac emergency, where tests confirmed a severe condition requiring immediate intervention. Emily stayed by her grandmother's side the entire time, refusing to let go of her hand except when medical procedures required it. While waiting for the test results, Robert tried contacting Emily's parents using the number left at the tenement, but without success. His scheduled shift at 2 p.m. had to be covered by another doctor. He refused to leave his new patients. "Dr. Mitchell, I need to speak with you," Patricia, the social worker, called, when he finally stepped out of the exam room to get coffee. "The situation is getting complicated. We can't reach the child's parents, and Mrs. Chang, being an undocumented foreigner, can't legally take responsibility for the girl." Robert ran a hand through his graying hair, exhausted. "We're dealing with a medical emergency, Patricia. The paperwork will have to wait." "It's not that simple. The administrative director has already been informed, and he's demanding an immediate meeting with you." Robert knew his respected position at the hospital didn't make him immune to institutional rules. Dr. Richard Thompson, the administrative director, was known for his strict adherence to protocols, especially regarding the hospital's financial concerns. The meeting, as expected, was tense. "Dr. Mitchell, you've put the hospital in a legally vulnerable position," Dr. Thompson began. Thompson, sitting rigidly behind his immaculate desk. "We have a child without proper documentation, an elderly, foreign woman in an irregular situation, and a doctor who ignored all institutional protocols." "We're talking about human lives, Richard, not protocols," replied Robert, dropping the formalities. "Human lives that cost money, doctor. Who's going?" "To cover the expenses for this treatment?" questioned the director. "The assistance program already covered the girl's surgery before, and the family didn't even return for the necessary follow-ups." "I'll cover it myself if necessary," Robert shot back, surprising even himself with the impulsive decision. Dr. Thompson raised his eyebrows. "You do realize we're talking about considerable sums, don't you? Especially if Mrs. Chang needs surgical procedures, as seems to be the case." "I know exactly what we're talking about, Richard. And I also know we have a reserve fund for humanitarian cases that's rarely used because you always find some bureaucratic obstacle." The director adjusted his glasses, visibly annoyed. "That fund has specific criteria, which can be relaxed in exceptional situations by the board of directors, of which I remind you I am a member," Robert finished. "I'm not asking for personal favors, Richard. I'm fulfilling my medical and human duty." After a lengthy discussion, they reached a temporary agreement. The hospital would cover the initial costs of Mrs. Chang's treatment, while Robert would take responsibility for sorting out the family's documentation within a week. As for Emily, she could stay at the hospital as her grandmother's companion, under the supervision of the social work team. When Robert returned to the room where Mrs. Chang was admitted, he found Emily sitting quietly by her grandmother's bed, drawing on a notepad some kind nurse had provided. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Chang?" he asked, checking the heart monitor. "Better with the medication," she replied weakly. "Thank you, doctor." "We need to talk about your treatment," Robert said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "The tests show you need surgical intervention. There's severe mitral stenosis compromising your heart's function." Mrs. Chang nodded, as if she already knew the diagnosis. "I saw the results. Same family condition Emily had." "Exactly. And the treatment will be similar too. A surgery to repair the valve." The elderly woman fell silent for a moment, then asked, "Who will pay, doctor? My daughter and son-in-law work hard, but they earn little. They already owe much for Emily's surgery." "Don't worry about that now," Robert reassured her. "The important thing is restoring your health." Mrs. Chang studied him with sharp eyes that betrayed her past as a doctor. "Doctor paying out of pocket?" she asked directly. "You can't do that." Robert smiled. "We'll find a solution, Mrs. Chang. The hospital has assistance programs." "Hospital already helped family so much. That's why we didn't return for Emily's checkups," she confessed. "My daughter is ashamed she can't pay. Her husband is afraid of trouble with the documents." Robert felt a pang in his chest, realizing fear and shame had kept this family from seeking the necessary treatment for both Emily and her grandmother. "I understand, but health must always come first. And speaking of which," he hesitated, noticing the folder Mrs. Chang kept close by on the hospital bed. "You mentioned you were a cardiologist in your country. Would you share your studies with me?" The elderly woman's face brightened with an energy that seemed to rejuvenate her. "Doctor is interested in my research." "Absolutely. Medical knowledge knows no borders, Mrs. Chang." Carefully, she opened the folder and pulled out several meticulously organized papers, some yellowed with age and worn at the edges, but all preserved with obvious care. Robert immediately recognized they weren't just personal records, but detailed research on a rare heart condition primarily affecting East Asian populations. "This is impressive," he murmured, flipping through documents written in a language he didn't understand, but recognizing the universal diagrams and technical notes of medicine. "Did you develop a specific treatment technique?" "Yes. In my country, we treated many cases like Emily's with traditional medicine alongside modern surgery," she explained. "Better results, fewer complications." As Robert examined the documents with growing interest, Emily stood to show him her drawing, a simple figure of a man in a white coat holding the hands of a little girl and an elderly woman. "Dr. Hart, Grandma Hart, and Emily Hart," she explained proudly. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out." Now, continuing. That simple child's drawing perfectly captured the strange connection that had formed between them. 3 generations, 3 lives, 3 hearts linked by extraordinary circumstances. "It's beautiful, Emily," Robert praised, feeling an unexpected emotion seeing how the girl had included him in her little family. At that moment, a nurse hurried into the room. "Dr. Mitchell, the girl's parents just arrived, and they're very upset." In the hallway, a young Asian couple was arguing heatedly with Patricia and 2 hospital security guards. The woman was crying, while the man gestured vehemently, his raised voice echoing down the corridor. "Where is my daughter? Where is my mother?" the woman demanded in broken English. "Why did hospital take them without permission?" Robert quickly approached, introducing himself. "I'm Dr. Robert Mitchell, overseeing your mother's treatment, and the one who found your daughter last night." The man turned to him, eyes flashing with anger and fear. "You can't just take our daughter like this. We have rights." "Mr. Park, please calm down," Robert said firmly. "Your daughter was alone out in the rain at the hospital entrance, and your mother-in-law is in critical condition, needing urgent medical care." "We didn't know Emily had left," the woman explained, visibly distraught. "When we got home from work and couldn't find my mother or my daughter," her voice broke, "we thought the worst. I understand your concern, Mrs. Park, but they're safe. Your mother needs emergency heart surgery and Emily is fine. She stayed with her grandmother." Mr. Park still seemed suspicious. "How much will all this cost? We can't afford it, and we don't want trouble with documents, with the government." "Let's talk about this calmly," Robert suggested. "The most important thing now is for you to see your daughter and your mother, and for us to figure out together the best treatment options. Though still hesitant, the couple followed Robert to the room where the family reunion was marked by tears and hugs. Emily ran to her parents as soon as she saw them, while Mrs. Chang watched the scene with clear relief. The initial tension gradually gave way to a more rational conversation as Robert explained Mrs. Chang's medical condition and treatment options. The Park family revealed they had immigrated to the US 3 years earlier, fleeing political persecution in their home country. Mrs. Chang, once a respected cardiologist, had seen her career and research destroyed when she publicly opposed certain government policies. "Mom lost everything," explained Mrs. Park. "Her life's work, her position, her respect. We came to the US with almost nothing just to protect her. And to give Emily a better future," added Mr. Park, who now held their daughter in his lap. "But it's been very hard. We work in a garment factory, long hours, little pay." Dr. Robert Mitchell listened carefully to the family's story, recognizing the sacrifice and courage they had shown. When Mr. Park mentioned again his concerns about the treatment costs and their undocumented status, Robert made a decision. "I have a proposal for you," he said. "I've reviewed Mrs. Chang's research on the heart condition affecting your family. It's valuable work that could benefit many other patients here in the US." Mrs. Chang sat up slightly in bed, her interest piqued. "What are you thinking, doctor?" "I suggest a collaboration. The hospital can cover Mrs. Chang's treatment costs as part of a research program. In return, she'd share her knowledge with our medical team. Think of it as specialized consulting." The elderly woman's eyes shone with a light that had been missing for a long time. "My work still has value?" "Immense value, Mrs. Chang, and I can help with your legal status through a humanitarian visa. I have some contacts who can assist." The Park family exchanged glances of cautious hope. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, fear seemed to give way to the possibility of a real solution. "Why are you helping us so much?" asked Mr. Park, still wary of such generosity. Robert paused before answering. "Because Emily reminded me of something I'd forgotten between surgeries and shifts, that behind every heart I operate on, there's an entire family, a whole story." He smiled at the little girl. "Your daughter crossed the city in a storm to save her grandmother. The least I can do is make sure that act of courage wasn't in vain." In the days that followed, Robert threw himself into 2 missions, preparing Mrs. Chang's surgery and helping the Parks with their legal situation. He personally handled every step, making calls, calling in favors, using his influence at the hospital to ensure their case got the attention it needed. During this time, he spent more hours with Emily than he had with his own daughter in months. The little girl often accompanied him on his rounds, watching with curious eyes as he examined other pediatric patients, always asking about each procedure, each piece of equipment. "Do you want to be a doctor when you grow up, Emily?" he asked one afternoon as she watched him fill out charts. "Yes, a heart doctor like you and Grandma," she answered promptly. Her reply filled him with inexplicable pride, as if, somehow, Emily were truly part of his family. Meanwhile, Mrs. Chang began sharing her knowledge with the medical team as she prepared for surgery. Robert organized small lectures where she, still from her hospital bed, explained her techniques and approaches for treating specific heart conditions. The other doctors were immediately intrigued, especially when they saw the documented results in her research. "It's fascinating how she integrates traditional techniques with modern medicine," remarked Dr. William, the hospital's senior cardiologist after one session. "This could revolutionize some of our treatment protocols." Mrs. Chang's surgery was scheduled for a Friday. The night before, Robert received an unexpected call. "Dad?" Emma's voice was hesitant on the other end. "Emma?" he answered, surprised. Your daughter rarely called him. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, She paused. "Mom told me about your message, that you're coming to my ballet recital on Saturday." "Yes, I'll be there for sure," he promised. "Is it important to you?" Emma asked, her voice betraying a rare insecurity for a teenager usually so determined. Robert felt a lump in his throat. "It's the most important thing in my weekend, Emma. I wouldn't miss it for anything. Not even for surgery." Her tone was half teasing, half serious. hinting at the many times he'd missed family events due to hospital emergencies. "Not even the most complex surgery in the world," he assured her. "I'm rearranging my entire schedule to be there." There was a brief silence before Emma said, "That means a lot to me, Dad." After hanging up, Robert grew thoughtful. He really was changing his work habits to prioritize his daughter, something he'd rarely done during his marriage. Ironically, it had taken a young patient to remind him of the importance of his own family. On the morning of Mrs. Chang's surgery, Robert arrived at the hospital especially early to review every detail. He was surprised to find an unexpected visitor in the waiting room, Dr. Margaret Wilson, his former medical school professor and current director of the prestigious American Heart Institute. "Margaret, what a surprise," he greeted her, genuinely startled by her presence. "Robert, my dear," she embraced him formally. "I heard you have a very special patient, a foreign cardiologist with groundbreaking research on East Asian-specific heart conditions." The casual tone didn't fool Robert. Margaret never made social visits. There was always a purpose behind her appearances. "News travels fast," he remarked cautiously. "In this field always," she smiled. "I'd like to meet her before the surgery, if possible. Perhaps we could discuss a collaboration between your hospital and the Institute. Her studies on alternative treatments for these specific conditions could perfectly complement our new experimental wing." Robert felt a warning stir inside him. He knew Margaret's reputation well. Brilliant, ambitious, and relentless in her pursuit of academic recognition. "I'll check if Mrs. Chang is open to visitors before the procedure," he replied diplomatically. "She's under a lot of stress, as you can imagine." Of course, but wouldn't it benefit her to know her research could continue at an institution like ours? With proper funding, international publications, she's more concerned with her recovery and her family's stability right now, Margaret. The doctor adjusted her posture, dropping some of the friendly tone. "Speaking of family, I heard you've been helping with immigration matters. Quite unusual for a surgeon, don't you think?" The implication was clear. Margaret knew about the Park family's irregular status and was subtly reminding him it could become problematic. "I do what I believe is ethically right for my patients," Robert replied firmly. "Admirable," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just be careful not to compromise your professional reputation by getting too involved. The medical board has been quite strict lately." Before Robert could respond, Nancy appeared in the hallway. "Dr. Mitchell, we're ready to begin prepping the patient." "I'll be right there," he answered, then turned back to Margaret. "We'll have to continue this conversation after the surgery." "Certainly. I'll be around," she assured him, her unspoken message lingering in the air even after she left. Mrs. Chang's surgery proved particularly challenging. The condition of her heart was more deteriorated than the initial tests had indicated, forcing Robert to improvise some techniques during the procedure. Interestingly, it was precisely some of the approaches described in the patient's own studies that ended up being decisive for the surgery's success. After nearly 6 hours in the operating room, Robert finally stepped out, exhausted but satisfied. Mrs. Chang was stable with good prospects for recovery. In the waiting room, he found the Park family and, to his surprise, Margaret still waiting. The surgery was a success, he announced, visibly relieving the family. "Mrs. Chang is recovering well. You'll be able to see her in a few hours once she wakes up from anesthesia." As the Parks thanked him emotionally, Margaret approached. "Congratulations, Robert. I heard it was quite an innovative procedure." "How could you know that so quickly?" he asked, surprised. "I have my connections," she replied with an enigmatic smile. "Actually, I'd like to invite you to present this case at next month's International Symposium. It would be the perfect opportunity to introduce Mrs. Chang's methods to the global medical community." The offer was tempting. An international symposium meant visibility, recognition, potential publications. But something about the way Margaret completely disregarded the Park family, as if they were mere accessories to the interesting medical case, deeply unsettled Robert. "I appreciate the invitation, Margaret, but I'd need to discuss this with Mrs. Chang first. After all, this is her research." Margaret's smile faltered slightly. Of course. Though technically, now that you've applied the techniques, the surgical execution is your intellectual property." "That's not how it works," Robert replied firmly. "Not without proper credit and consent." Before the discussion could continue, Robert's phone rang. It was Richard, the administrative director. "Robert, I need to see you in my office immediately. It's about the Park family." The urgency in his tone alarmed Robert. Apologizing briefly, he headed to the director's office, finding him visibly unsettled. "What happened, Richard?" "I got a call from Immigration and Customs Enforcement," the director replied bluntly. "Someone reported an undocumented immigrant. Family staying at our hospital. They're on their way to verify." Robert felt his blood run cold. The connection to Margaret's visit was too obvious to be a coincidence. "We need to handle this right away," he said, already grabbing his phone. "I'll call Dr. Johnson from the legal department." The next few hours were a race against time. Robert mobilized every contact he had cultivated over the past weeks, including a former patient who worked at the consulate and an immigration attorney. The paperwork for a humanitarian visa, which normally took weeks, had to be expedited within hours. Meanwhile, Mrs. Chang woke from anesthesia, completely unaware of the bureaucratic drama unfolding behind the scenes. Emily stayed by her side, quietly drawing, while her parents waited anxiously in the hallway, instructed by Robert not to leave the hospital under any circumstances. When Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents finally arrived, they were met not only by Robert and Richard, but also by Dr. Johnson and a consulate representative who presented temporary humanitarian asylum documentation for the Park family based on Mrs. Chang's political persecution in her home country and her potential scientific contributions to the U.S. "This family is under temporary consular protection," the representative explained. "The formal regularization process is underway, expedited due to Dr. Chang's medical condition." The agents, though skeptical, didn't have much they could do given the official documentation presented. After checking the papers and asking a few questions, they said they'd return to monitor the process but wouldn't take any immediate action. Once the agents left, Robert couldn't contain his anger. It was Margaret, wasn't it? She made the report when she realized she wouldn't get easy access to Mrs. Chang's research. Dr. Thompson let out a heavy sigh. "We can't prove that, Robert, and accusing the director of the institute without evidence would be dangerous for your career." "My career?" Robert laughed bitterly. "We're talking about an entire family that almost got separated and deported, who thanks to your connections are safe now," Dr. Thompson pointed out. "Focus on that, not on revenge against Margaret." The advice was wise but hard to follow. Robert felt betrayed by his colleague, someone who should prioritize patients' well-being over any personal ambitions. When he returned to check on Mrs. Chang, he found Emily in the hallway gazing out the window at the night sky. "You okay, kiddo?" he asked, crouching to her level. "Will Grandma be okay, Doctor?" she asked, her big dark eyes full of worry. "She will. Your grandma is very strong, you know, and very smart too." Emily smiled. "Like Doctor. Doctor is strong and smart." Robert was caught off guard by a sudden wave of emotion. This child, who had endured so much hardship, still found room for admiration and trust. "You're strong, and smart too, Emily, much more than I am." The girl shook her head as if the idea were absurd. "No, Emily, just little girl." "A little girl who crossed the city in a storm to save her grandma," he reminded her. "That takes more courage than many surgeries I've done." Emily considered this for a moment, then asked innocently, "Doctor's daughter brave too?" The question hit Robert hard. "Emma, her ballet recital was the next day." "Yes, very brave. She dances ballet, you know. Tomorrow she has a very important performance." "Doctor will see daughter dance?" "I will, I promised her." Emily smiled, seeming satisfied with the answer. "Good. Daughter needs father, like Emily." The child's simple, direct wisdom was unsettling. For years, Robert had convinced himself that his absence in Emma's life was justified by his important work, saving other children. But now, through Emily's eyes, he saw the flaw in his logic. All children needed their parents, including his own. The next morning, after confirming Mrs. Chang was recovering well and the Park family was safe at the hospital, Robert prepared to keep his promise to Emma. He put on his best suit, bought flowers, and drove to Milwaukee, where the recital was being held. The theater was packed when he arrived. He found Jennifer in the third row, who seemed genuinely surprised he'd actually shown up. "You came," she said, more a statement than a question. "I promised her," he replied simply. The performance was magnificent. Emma danced with a grace and precision Robert had never fully appreciated before, always distracted by work, concerns during the rare times he'd attended her past performances. This time he was fully present, absorbing every movement, every expression. When the show ended and applause filled the theater, Robert felt a pride that rivaled any professional satisfaction he'd ever known. Backstage, Emma ran to hug him, something she hadn't done spontaneously in years. "You really came," she whispered, still in her ballet costume. "Of course I did. I said it would be the most important part of my weekend, didn't I?" Emma stepped back slightly, studying her father's face. "You're different." "Different how?" "I can't explain it. More present, even though you've always been physically here. Before, even when you came to my performances, it felt like your mind was somewhere else." His daughter's sharp observation surprised him. Emma had always been perceptive, but she was rarely so open about her feelings toward him. "I've realized some important things lately," Dr. Robert Mitchell admitted, "about what really matters." After the recital, the three of them went out to dinner together, something that hadn't happened since before the divorce. The conversation flowed more easily than Robert could have hoped, with Emma excitedly sharing her plans to apply to medical school, something he hadn't known about. "Medicine? Since when?" he asked, surprised. "Since forever, Dad," she replied with a hint of exasperation. "I just never talked much about it because, well, I thought you might assume I was just trying to impress you." Jennifer gently interjected, "Emma has always admired your work, Robert, even when she was angry with you for being absent." The dinner continued, with Robert sharing the story of Emily Kim and Mrs. Chang, and how that experience had changed his perspective on many things. "That girl seems to have taught you quite a lesson," Jennifer remarked with a soft smile, one she hadn't directed at her ex-husband in a long time. "Several lessons," he agreed, the biggest one being that it's never too late to make things right. At the end of the evening, as they said goodbye, Emma asked, "Can I visit the hospital sometime? Meet this Emily Kim and her grandmother?" The question caught Robert off guard. "Of course you can. I think Emily would love to meet you. She's already asked about my daughter." "Really?" "Yes, and I think you two have a lot in common, you know. Strength, determination, intelligence." Emma blushed slightly at the genuine praise. "Then I'll come visit next week, okay?" "That would be perfect." Back in Chicago on Sunday, Robert found Mrs. Chang sitting up in bed, already reviewing some of her research notes with Dr. William, the senior cardiologist. Emily was beside her grandmother, watching the adults' conversation intently. "Dr. Robert!" the girl exclaimed when she saw him running to hug his legs. "Hello, little one," he smiled, lifting her briefly. "How's Grandma today?" "Better. Grandma doctor talking medicine with other doctor." Mrs. Chang smiled, looking genuinely stronger, not just physically, but in spirit. "Dr. William is very interested in my studies on complementary therapy for congenital heart conditions," she explained. "We're discussing the possibility of a pilot program here at the hospital." Robert felt deep satisfaction seeing how in such a short time this family's life had begun to transform. Mrs. Chang was regaining not just her health, but her professional identity and purpose. Emily's parents, now in the process of having their immigration status regularized, might eventually find better work opportunities. "Dr. C. daughter dance?" Emily asked, remembering their earlier conversation. "Yes, Emily, and she sent you a hug." "For Emily?" The girl's eyes widened, clearly surprised the doctor's daughter knew about her. "Yes, I told her all about you. And you know what? She wants to meet you. She's coming to visit next week." Emily's face lit up with a radiant smile. "Emily have friend, and I'll have my daughter back," Robert thought, feeling immense gratitude for everything that had led to this moment. On Monday, a surprise awaited Robert when he arrived at the hospital. In the main lobby, a sizable group of doctors and staff had gathered, many of them colleagues he had worked with over the years. At the front of the group stood Dr. Thompson, looking unusually animated. "Robert, so glad you made it. We have a proposal to discuss with you," announced the administrative director. "A proposal?" Dr. Williams stepped forward. "We talked a lot. Over the weekend, inspired by Mrs. Chang's case, integrating traditional approaches with modern medicine for treating specific heart conditions has incredible potential. And the board approved the creation of a new department," added Dr. Thompson. "A Center for Integrative Cardiac Medicine, combining conventional techniques with scientifically validated complementary approaches." Robert looked around, noticing the genuine enthusiasm of his colleagues. "And where do I fit into this?" "We want you to lead the new center," replied Dr. Thompson, "with Mrs. Chang as a specialized consultant once she's fully recovered." The proposal was unexpected and thrilling. A center like that could help countless patients, especially those from immigrant communities who often fell through the cracks of the traditional healthcare system. "There's one condition, though," Robert added after a moment of reflection. "I want to establish a specific care program for low-income and immigrant families with easier access and reduced or subsidized costs." Dr. Thompson hesitated, clearly considering the financial implications. "That would require a significant budget, which we can secure through partnerships and donations," Robert argued. "And think of the research benefits and institutional recognition. It would be groundbreaking in the country." The discussion continued for hours, with many doctors contributing ideas and suggestions. The enthusiasm was contagious, reminding Robert of the spirit that had first drawn him to medicine, the genuine desire to help people, to make a difference in the lives of those who needed it most. By the end of the meeting, a preliminary agreement had been reached. The Center for Integrative Cardiac Medicine would be established, with a specific program for vulnerable populations. Mrs. Chang would be formally invited as a specialized consultant, receiving a work visa that would help permanently secure her family's status. When Robert went to share the news with Mrs. Chang, he found her stronger, sitting in a chair by the window. Emily was beside her, reading a children's book about the human body, a gift from one of the nurses. "I have wonderful news," he announced, explaining the entire proposal. Mrs. Chang listened intently, her eyes glistening slightly. "My work will continue?" she asked, her voice trembling. "After losing everything, I thought I'd never—" "Not just continue, Mrs. Chang. Your knowledge will be the foundation of something new and important, something that can help many people." The elderly woman gripped Robert's hand with surprising strength for someone recovering from heart surgery. "How can I thank you, doctor? You saved not only my heart but my whole family's. The gratitude is mine, Mrs. Chang. Your granddaughter gave me back something I had lost long ago." Emily looked at them both, curious. "What did Emily give back to the doctor?" Robert smiled, touched by the innocence of the question. "My own heart, Emily. You reminded me why I chose to be a doctor, and more importantly, you reminded me that being a father is the most important job I have." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The following week came the moment Emily had been waiting for. Emma's visit. Antonio's daughter arrived at the hospital carrying a small package wrapped in colorful paper. When she saw Emily, she smiled and knelt to meet the little girl at eye level. "Hello, Emily. I'm Emma, Dr. Robert's daughter." Emily looked at her in awe. "Do you dance?" she asked, remembering what the doctor had told her. "Yes, I dance ballet," Emma replied, charmed by the little girl. "I brought you a gift." Emily accepted the package with reverence, carefully unwrapping it to reveal a small plastic toy stethoscope. "To start your training as a doctor," Emma explained, winking at her father, who watched the scene with emotion. Emily's eyes widened with joy. "Now, Emily Doctor too," she declared, immediately placing the stethoscope in her ears and pressing the end against Emma's chest. "Heart beating good." Emma's spontaneous laughter filled the hospital hallway, a sound Robert hadn't heard in a long time. Seeing his daughter interact so naturally with Emily gave him a sense of wholeness he'd never imagined possible. As the two discussed medicine, with Emily asking questions and Emma patiently answering, Robert realized this small encounter perfectly symbolized the bridge that had been built between the different aspects of his life, ones that had remained separate for so long. In the months that followed, many changes took place. The Center for Integrative Cardiac Medicine was officially opened, with Robert as director and Mrs. Chang as lead consultant. The Park family fully regularized their immigration status, moving into a modest but dignified apartment near the hospital. Emily was enrolled in a public school, where she quickly excelled, especially in science. On weekends, she often visited the hospital as a junior volunteer, accompanying visits to young patients and handing out drawings to cheer them up. Robert completely restructured his professional routine. He limited his shifts, delegated responsibilities, and made sure every Friday was free to visit Emma in Milwaukee. The bond between father and daughter flourished again, especially when Emma began showing concrete interest in medicine, often visiting the hospital to observe procedures. During one such visit, she surprised her father by announcing, "I've decided what specialty I want to pursue after med school." "Already? You haven't even started yet," Robert chuckled. "I want pediatrics with a focus on cardiology," she declared. "But not like you, with surgery. I want to work on prevention and alternative treatments like Dr. Chang teaches." The choice moved Robert deeply. It was as if a circle was closing, with his daughter choosing a path that united his professional legacy with the humanitarian lessons they'd all learned through the Park family. "I think Emily will want to be your resident one day," he teased. "She'll probably end up teaching me the way she picks things up," Emma laughed. On a particularly meaningful afternoon, about a year after Robert first met Emily in the rain, he gathered everyone at a small restaurant to celebrate. The entire Park family, including Mrs. Chang, now fully recovered, Emma and Jennifer, with Hui, whom he now maintained a friendly relationship, and some close colleagues from the hospital who had become an important part of this story. During dinner, Mr. Park stood up shyly to make a toast, his English now much more fluent. "I want to thank Dr. Robert, who not only saved my daughter's and mother-in-law's hearts, but gave our family a second chance. When we came to America, we lost so much. Today, thanks to you, we've gained so much more." Emily, who had been watching attentively, added with her simple wisdom, "Dr. Hart fixes broken heart, not just with surgery, but with love." The child's innocent words perfectly captured the transformative journey they had all experienced. Robert had truly fixed broken hearts, not just in the literal sense of his profession, but by rebuilding his relationship with Emma, helping the Park family find hope in a new country, and allowing Mrs. Chang to regain her professional dignity. In the process, his own heart, which had been fractured by divorce, the distance from his daughter and years of prioritizing work over personal relationships had also been mended. As he watched everyone interacting harmoniously around the table, Robert reflected on how a simple encounter in the rain had set off a cascade of events that changed so many lives, including his own. All because a 5-year-old girl had the courage to cross the city in a storm, seeking help for her grandmother. The Center for Integrative Cardiac Medicine had grown into a nationally recognized institution, attracting doctors interested in complementary approaches and especially benefiting immigrant populations who had previously avoided the healthcare system out of fear or lack of resources. The combination of Mrs. Chang's traditional knowledge with modern medicine had resulted in innovative protocols that significantly improved outcomes for diverse patients. Emily, now fluent in English and adjusted to American school life, still dreamed of becoming a doctor, often visiting the center with her grandmother. Her presence brought joy to the hospital halls, especially when she interacted with other young patients. The experience with the Park family inspired Robert to create a special support program for immigrant families with children in need of cardiac care, offering not just medical assistance, but also legal and social support for documentation and integration into American society. Emma, after being accepted into one of the country's top medical schools, often volunteered with the program, confirming her calling and further strengthening her rebuilt bond with her father. As for Dr. Wilson, time proved to be the best judge. When Mrs. Chang's research began gaining international recognition under the ethical supervision of Robert and his team, she tried to claim credit. insisting she had been the one to discover the immigrant doctor's potential. But the medical community already knew the true story, and her opportunistic ambitions ended up damaging her own reputation. On a quiet autumn afternoon, 2 years after that rainy night that changed everything, Robert found himself sitting on a bench in the hospital garden, watching Emily play happily with other children. Beside him was Mrs. Chang, now a respected medical consultant, reviewing some research documents. "Who could have imagined, right?" the elderly woman remarked, following Robert's gaze toward her granddaughter. "How one little child could change so many lives. Sometimes we need to see the world through a child's eyes to remember what really matters," he replied. "Emily taught me more about being a doctor and about being a father than all my years of training." Mrs. Chang smiled. "In my culture, we believe no meeting is an accident. Everyone who crosses our path brings a lesson, a purpose." "And what was the purpose of us finding Emily that night?" Robert asked, curious. Mrs. Chang looked at the doctor with wisdom in her eyes. "Perhaps it wasn't you who found Emily, Doctor. Perhaps it was she who found you." The observation resonated deeply within Robert. Indeed, although technically it was he who had found the girl in the rain, in a deeper sense, it was Emily who had found him, who had reached his heart, hardened by routine, and reminded him of the compassion that had led him to medicine in the first place. On that rainy night, a doctor saw a beggar child sleeping at the hospital's doorstep. The reason behind that seemingly chance encounter turned out to be far deeper than anyone could have imagined. Not just saving lives through medicine, but also healing hearts through compassion, rebuilding families through understanding, and reminding everyone that human connections are, in the end, what truly heal us. The end of the story. Dear listener, Dr. Robert's journey reminds us that small acts of kindness can transform entire lives. And you, have you ever experienced an encounter that changed your destiny? Share with us in the comments, and don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories.